So, can you tell us your name and what neighborhood you grew up in Cincinnati?
My name is Tom Elchhorn. I grew up in Mount Washington, Ohio. Of course, I wasn't alive during the '37 flood, but a story that I did hear I thought was very interesting. My aunt, Irma Lanter, she died in 1984, but in her obituary, besides listing all her relatives and all that, she listed about the 1937 flood. My grandmother and grandfather lived in Evanston, Ohio, and the distance between there and California was like 10 miles. But what was said was that my aunt had written that my grandfather had to drive 110 miles around to get down to I guess it was 3 Mile Road, which leads into Coney Island Parkway up in the hill, and drive and walk through the woods, and got my aunt and uncle, and they had 3 boys, 9 and 7, and an infant, less than a year old, and they packed them in the car, drove the 110 miles back again, and back to Evanston, and they stayed there for I'm not sure how long, but I just thought it was interesting, and I just curious how the route he had to take, but it just seemed unbelievable he had to drive that far. But you know, how the flood is. So that's the only thing that I thought was interesting. I mean, that got my attention, and one of the main reasons I came down here today was just curious if I ran into anybody that was from California, Ohio, and California's a pretty close-knit community. They probably knew my aunt and uncles that lived down there.
California seems like it's always probably been hit by a
Yeah,
flood.
yeah. It's
Did you hear any stories growing up about the '37 flood, other than the family stories?
no, not really. But I do remember in 1945, I was about 4 years old, and it had a flood. I think it got up to about 70 feet in '45, and I can remember being with my father in a rowboat. It was just below Kellogg Avenue, down by where I think it was El Dorado, and where Lebo's is now. And my aunt and uncle's house was just right down the street, and they were the water was up almost to the second floor. So I can remember that, but that was only 70 feet. So or
Is there
what?
like a flood culture down there?
Yeah, right. I think so. I always thought I wouldn't want to live down there. You got to move every so often, but you know, I guess they learned to adapt, and they didn't like living down there. They would have moved. So, but that's about all I can remember. I just curious, and like I said, I'm hoping I run into somebody that lived in California at the time. I'd like to talk to them.
Well, great. Thank you for coming down